Hi, welcome to the Lone Star Dowsers. I'm Mary Lindsay Wilson and your host. And this is the July 2024 Lone Star Dowsing program. And wow, I have some announcements to make. I want to thank everybody that has um, contributed and done donations because that's what makes this possible. So thank you if you've made a donation. And if you feel like you want to make a donation, you're welcome to mail a check or do a PayPal, and it'll be on it's either on the link that you received tonight or it'll be on the replay. We have some weekly dowsing Zooms. So the Tucson Dowsers at 9 p.m. Central meet on um, Zoom, and they help to aid in relief from fires, droughts, heat waves, and floods. So we are grateful for that, and you're welcome to join them. And uh, we need that because we were just talking about Houston being kind of pummeled, the Texas Gulf Coast anyhow. Uh, let's see, and there's a Dows for the Planet every Thursday night on Zoom. So this is hosted by our friends from Australia, Heather Wilkes and Francis Peterson. So it's Dowsing for Healing for Australia and beyond. So they do dowsing programs, for the planet. So if you'd like to participate and expand your knowledge and experience and what we can do for everything that's going on, then please join. So, okay, well, tonight our speaker is Jason Kirby, and Jason is out of Alabama,
Mhm.
Birmingham, Alabama, actually, and he is going to talk about house healing. He's a professional house healer, and it's not feng shui. He's got his own really unique method of doing this, and he incorporates lots of things, including dowsing and the history of the land. So I think it's pretty amazing process that he's got. So he's going to share that with us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jason Kirby.
Mhm.
Welcome,
Need me to
Jason.
start doing my program, like,
Jason, tell it
because
if
we're
you
talking about
want to
asking
add a
questions,
little
or
bit to, what that is. I mean, why don't you tell people how you got started?
so I got into dowsing. Well, into house healing. It was not a very dramatic entrance. Years ago, my meditation teacher, I think, slipped up, and she was like, I signed up for a class, and she was like, "Oh, I'm studying house healing and stuff." So that kind of got my ears perked up. And then even before that, this was in 2010. Um, one of my I spoke at the downtown library. I work in the genealogy department, and I was giving a lecture in Gadsden, which is my hometown. And this guy showed up with dowsing rods, and I thought he was completely nuts. I mean, I knew what they were, but I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. And he said, "Well, I spoke at the previous meeting, and it's about grave dowsing. So you can actually douse for graves." So that's kind of how I got into it.
Well,
And
and
for
with genealogy,
genealogy,
that makes sense because,
yeah,
you have to do a lot of records, and sometimes you're out in cemeteries and you're trying to find,
yeah.
yeah, family trees and that kind of thing. So,
So that kind of sparked it. And then after my program, I had a friend with me, and he's like, "Have your friend lay down." And he handed me the sticks. And I remember walking up thinking, this is not going to work. And I'm going to prove you wrong. And I could feel the tension on the rods push in. And it's like putting two magnets together that are the same polarity. And then as soon as I left, moved over him, it opened back up. And I knew that wasn't me. So every dowser remembers that moment where their sticks move for the first time, or they get an answer through dowsing. So that kind of hooked me. So little things like that. I've had spiritual teachers throughout the year. I've studied pranic healing, Reiki. I've taken classes on crystals and meditation and feng shui. And I do a combined method of a lot of things when I'm doing house healing. So lots of a long path. I don't think people just wake up and go, "I want to be a house healer." So I incorporate a lot into that.
Yeah, well, great. I love that you worked at the library and kind of got your start with genealogy.
Mhm.
And so then what was the next step? So you, I mean,
I
yeah,
kind of
tell
played with dowsing a little bit on and off, but I didn't know the full extent of what you could do with it. Again, I was looking through the lens of you can only find water, you can only find buried treasure, you can only find lost objects. I had no idea you could access your intuition and do a number of things. So that kind of really, house healing really broadened my view. Um, of what you could do with dowsing and the things that you cannot see that could affect you in your house. So that was a huge thing just in your space. A lot of people, because they don't see something, they don't think that it's messing with them or interfering with their life. So that really opened me up when I could douse something and actually pick up on what is in a space.
Yeah. I think that's very true. There's a lot that goes on. So what are some of the things that you want to explain your process and kind of how you go through
I mean,
your
normally when I get a
process?
client, I do a one-on-one to see what the situation is. You know, there's a bunch of healers out there. I want to make sure I'm a good fit for you and vice versa. So it has to work both ways. And just explain what's going on. Am I the best fit for you? My clock is fixing to go off. Hold on. I have antique clocks, so they chime. Okay. So I want to make sure I'm the right fit for you. If you're describing something that's not in my area of expertise, I'm going to tell you up front that's not what I do. You know, find somebody else. So I try to be upfront. And basically, I look at 65 different areas. About 45 areas deal with the house and land, about 20 deal with the individual. Um, I research the property, I look at the land, I take what I know and what I don't know. It's like my rational and my irrational mind putting it together, and that kind of paints a picture of what is actually happening on the space. So it's like a big puzzle. You find your corner pieces, you find your straight pieces, and then you start grouping it together, and it kind of unfolds.
Yeah, I imagine you've come across some very interesting things about the land. I mean, and it's not maybe as easy as one would think to kind of research what happened on that property. So how do you go about that?
Normally in the one-on-one, I'm going to ask them as many questions as possible, like how long have you lived here? Any history that they know about saves me a lot of time of digging. But then afterwards, I'm going to look at the property. I'm going to look at past owners. I'm going to look at genealogical records and see if that's any clues to what's going on. I look at industrial things that are happening up and down the street or nearby. Like in Birmingham, we have a lot of coal mining, so that's a big thing. If you live near an airport, that can do things. So certain things can trigger different things. So I'm always looking for things like that to pop up. After I do all the research, then I go into the dowsing, and the dowsing kind of picks up on what I'm not picking up on in textbooks and looking at genealogy and stuff. So that kind of helps. So it's a combined effort of the two when I put it together.
So I'm sure you've got some stories to tell. Yeah, don't just have at it.
Well, I mean, are you talking about the ones in Texas or just in general, or?
Yeah, I mean, what are some, I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
sure
every
people,
house teaches me something. I learn as much as the clients do. So, you know, I look back at some of my earliest houses that taught me certain things, and then now I'm doing stuff that I didn't even do in the early days. My procedures change. I tweak them all the time as I evolve and grow. My protocols change and tweak. So I've had everything from doing apartments and condos to houses. I've had houses that had deceased spirits in them. I've had houses that had underground water, geopathic stress, fighting with neighbors will actually come up. It's a dowsable thing if there's enough energy behind it. Um, you know, all kinds of stuff. So every house, and then I've had houses that fought me back where the thing in the house did not want me there. So normally, if I show up, if something is there, they know I'm not there for dinner. So I've had houses that got louder as I progressed. I think I was kind of, as I was growing, Source was kind of waiting for me to get some houses under my belt, and then they're like, we're going to raise the ante up. So they're always stretching me and giving me a more challenging house, or a house may have something and they'll be like, you've never experienced this before, but there's going to be something that's going to teach you something, but we're going to protect you, but it's all about learning. So I've had houses like that happen. And then I've had houses where I walked in and got a headache immediately, and I knew that there was something in the house that didn't want me. And it was a lady that had been in the house for 50 years, and she didn't like the new owners. She didn't like me. She didn't like the changes happening to the house. The husband was tearing up stuff, and she was just not happy. So things like that have happened. Um, I rarely find a house that doesn't have somebody that's not deceased that hasn't crossed over properly in a house. Um, but I've had a good success rate getting people to transition back into the light. I don't do an exorcism. It's a more kinder approach. I try to find out what the issue is and deal with this person heart to heart. It works a lot better than going in and saying, get out, get out, get out. It doesn't work well that way. They kick and buck sometimes. So that's happened. I've had some really bizarre houses. Let's see what else. I had two brand new houses, and people think, oh, new house, there's no problems. Both of them were farmhouses. They were houses built on farms, and they inherited stuff from the farm. So even a new house, older houses tend to have more. A new house, it's going to absorb stuff from the land. So if the land has something, it's going to work its way into a house. An old house is like a sponge. It's going to pick up all kinds of stuff. It's been around longer. It has more of a story. So older houses are unique in their own way. Apartments are different from a house. You have higher turnover. You have a lot of people crammed into a tight space above, below, and to the sides. So apartments, condos, retirement facilities, they're very different from a residential house. Um, so it's a unique thing. I mean, I did 5 houses. I did my house first. That was a growing curve. I did the library at work, and my boss is not even a woo-woo person. And I said, okay, I'm going to do the healing over the weekend, and I want you to come in Monday and tell me how you feel. And she walked in and she's like, it feels different. And I was like, yeah. So even she was picking up on stuff. I did my neighbor next door. Her dead sister was still in her house. She actually got mad. She did not have a good relationship with her. And she's like, why is she in my house? And I said, it just feels comfortable for her. It feels familiar.
Familiar, yeah.
So of course she wanted her out of her house. But she was in the house. That house had a dead cat. That was my first dead animal I had to deal with. She kept talking about
The
this.
literal dead cat, or like
Yeah,
passed
dead cat,
over dead cat?
passed over dead cat.
Okay, let me
So
clarify. Are you in person with these house healings, or is it remote?
I can do both. This was my neighbor, so I could walk across the street and get into the house. This one had a deceased cat that, just like a person, did not cross over properly, which can happen. Animals can do the exact same thing. The first couple of houses, it was like, is this working? And of course, you doubt it, and then you question it to death. And then I would work on a property remotely and then go into the house, and everything I found actually dowsed. And after about the fifth house, then it starts building your dowsing muscles. And then you're like, okay, I got this. Then you can start doing them remotely. So I've done a friend in Austria. I've done Massachusetts. I've done a lot in Texas recently, North Carolina. Most of them are Birmingham, Alabama, and a few in Gadsden. So just like other energy practitioners like Reiki, pranic, they can all be done distantly. So there's no difference in house healing. Now, if I do it distantly, I do need a floor plan. So I tune into the floor plan and douse the floor plan to tune into the property as if I'm standing in the house and trying to find out what is happening in the space.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So right now I currently live in an apartment. So how would you go about finding the history of the land and the apartment. I mean, I guess
Well,
if
you
you
would give
just,
me as much as you know.
hmm
And then I would start looking at the property and peeling back the layers and just seeing. I don't have to go super far back if it's not needed. I could look at Google Images and see if there are older images. Some apartments will say on their website, or maybe pull the business record and it will say this apartment began in 2007. So now I know when it was built. I can look at city directories, which are like old phone books, and see what was there at that address before. I can do reverse address lookups. I can call the local library and say, hey, I'm calling from out of town. I'm working on this property. When I did Waxahachie, I called the one of the museums and they gave me the oldest guy in town, like the historian, and he
uh-huh.
was a wealth of knowledge. And he's like, this was all farmland and they grew cotton. I was like, there you go. And I said, so I'm working on this neighborhood. And I said, what was there before? He said, it was farmland. So sometimes I'll talk to someone local, but I try to get as much from the current owner as I can get. That saves me so much time. So if it's somebody that lived in a house that's been there forever, they're going to have a lot more history. An apartment, you could just say, well, I moved in on this date. Um, I've lived in this area, so I know it's been here for at least 10 years. So I just take all the clues and start, it's like a puzzle, and you just start piecing the puzzle together. I don't have to know everything that happened on the property back to the 1500s. You know, um, I can go back so far, and if I need to go back further, like when I tune into it, then I can dig and find other records. With a house, I can go back really far because I get an address and I can run that address through. If I get some of the past owners, I can run their names through, looking for clues, seeing how long they were at that address. That helps if there's deceased spirits in the house because I can actually douse and go, is it this person, or this person? And put a name with a face. Most of the time, the ones that are in houses are going to be family members or previous residents. But with an
You're part
apartment,
detective when you do that.
yes. So I do a lot of historical research, detective work, that type of stuff.
And I guess you have a set of questions of what, um, or how do you determine? Do you have a like a checklist of things that
Yes.
you kind of go through?
Yeah. And then it's like going down a rabbit hole. For every yes, that leads to 50 other questions. So there could be tons of stuff just with one yes question. So it can lead through a whole series of things. And then, like that time that source was like, this is something you've never dealt with before. So then it's like brand new material. So then I have to, it's like a dowsing game. Is this a spirit? Is it a nature spirit? Is it this? Is it that? Is it like a curse? Is it a spell? Is it like, and that's where I have to take what I know and really go back and forth and try to figure out what it is. And when it's something new like that, you kind of have to create the protocol because there's not going to be one out there, especially if no one's ever dealt with that before or published the information on that.
Are most people aware that something is off about the house that they do it, or does someone just call you and say, "Hey, I think this would be a good idea"?
Most of the people that call are going to be, I find women are more sensitive. They have the language to describe what they're feeling. I've rarely had a male call going, hey, my house is jacked up. Normally the wife calls, especially with a husband and wife. She'll call and say, something's up and I can't put my finger on it. So I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, does your husband feel it? And she's like, no. And I feel sorry for the husbands because they get drugged into this. And sometimes they're kicking and bucking and they're like, why is this guy running through my house with sticks? So I kind of feel sorry. Some husbands want to be a part of it and some don't. They're like, do whatever, but don't involve me. So as long as I have one person, that's my conduit to get in. And then once I have the floor plan, it's like I have the keys to the building or to the house. I can tune into that house at any moment and start peeling back the layers. So it's like an onion. You just peel back the layers and you find more stuff, and that opens up more things. And um, It's like a big puzzle, big jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So how can you explain to people how you're different than feng shui?
So feng shui, I mean, some of the principles in house healing kind of overlay with feng shui. I tell people, I don't care where your furniture is. I don't care what it's made out of. If something runs across an area that you spend a lot of time, like your bed, and I find something that runs across your bed, that's going to get my attention. If something's on your furniture and I detect it, that will get my attention. Like I did one house and he was married 3 times and she was married twice. And when I'm dowsing the furniture, certain furniture pieces jumped out and they started laughing. And I was like, what is so funny? And they said, that's all the divorce furniture. And I said, well, that was the last memory attached to that furniture. So it made sense, but they had not mentioned that. But then in the one-on-one, but it definitely showed up that these pieces had things. So furniture is like sponges, it's going to soak up stuff. Feng Shui would be great if you want to add another layer to bring in more beneficial energy. I think that would be a good component. And there is a whole science behind where your furniture is and the placement and the color and the material. I just don't have time to do everything I'm doing and style your house at the same time and pick colors for you. I'm in there to look for the bad stuff. I don't have time to look at good things. And one person got mad that I don't look for good things. And I'm like, you shouldn't need my help finding good things in your life. So I'm looking for the detrimental things that are affecting you. Um, Feng Shui, that would be a great addition to a house healing if you wanted to add another layer to it.
But you're
Um,
really working with the property and the dwelling itself, and then I guess the people
yeah.
inside and
So
or
a house
neighbors,
is
I
an
guess.
Yeah, the house is an extension of the people. So if the house has got issues, I know the people have issues. So sometimes when I do a healing, there won't be a lot in the house, and the direction is kind of pointing toward the people. So I know they're going to be the focus. Sometimes it's both. It will manifest in both areas. And not everybody calls and says, "Hey, my house is jacked up." Maybe you're just going through a lot, divorce, job changes, the pandemic, COVID, 2020, life. That can do stuff. Or if your kids are picking up on stuff, maybe your house feels fine and there's a room that just doesn't feel great and you don't know why. You don't have to have a haunted house. I don't look for haunted houses, but if there is something in there and I'm going to pick up on it, I'll deal with it. But that's not the focus of what I look for. Um, so people call for a number of reasons. I've had people that said something's messing with me in my house, all the way to I want a fresh start. Maybe I'm going through a lot of changes, or I just moved and I just want a fresh start with everything. So I'll just go through and clean everything where they can have that fresh start with no interference from the things that are there.
Okay, so question. So when you were talking about the couple with the divorce furniture that they kind of merged, do you clear that, or do you recommend they just let it
In a
go and
worst
get something else?
in a worst case scenario, which doesn't happen often, I will get the advice to get rid of it. I've only had that happen twice. One, there was a kid, I was going through the house and everything was fine, but I knew that there was stuff in his bedroom. And I was going in just doing furniture and I heard Source say, look under the bed. And as soon as I did, I was kind of scared what I was going to find in a teenager's bedroom under his bed. But there was a Ouija board. And I'm like, that's not the best thing. It's not the most grounded way to communicate with the other side. It will open up doors that you cannot shut. And I was like, he wasn't trying to do stuff, but he was very impressionable. He was very open. He was also very wounded at times. And I was like, that's just not the best thing. And his father bought it and it's sold as a board game by Parker Brothers, which is insane. But it's like, you don't need that. And I wrote in the report, I would advise you to get rid of that. I had a table once that was in the house that um, had some stuff on it that came from my father. And I heard, you're not going to be able to clean that, get rid of it. So I've only had two items that that's happened on. But furniture can have, it can be anywhere from minor emotional stuff to major stuff to I've had spirits attached to a piece of furniture. I had a woman that had a bed that had crazy stuff going on, and everybody that slept in the bed had major problems. And I could track everything down to the bed, and I said, it's the bed. So that was very interesting. So there's a whole gamut of how screwed up a piece of furniture can be. So on the light end, it's emotional, divorce furniture or something, but then on the high end, it can have things actually attached to it.
Mm, interesting. Very interesting. So,
And furniture is like sponges, so it oozes out. So depending on how sensitive you are, if you have a lot of these pieces, antiques tend to score very high on that. Probably the most polluted furniture is the dining room table, is one, and a piano, especially if you were forced to take piano lessons and any owner hated the piano, those emotions will be in that piano. Dining room table, if you had to have a serious conversation or don't sit like that, sit up straight. If you don't clean your plate, you can't go outside. A lot of tension. It's not that good things didn't happen at the dining room table. I look for the bad stuff. So if anything detrimental is attached, that's what I'm going to pick up on. And I always ask, is there something detrimental on that piece of furniture? And normally it's going to be emotional stuff. On the high end, it's going to be something attached to it. And that's a whole different ball game. So
what about mirrors?
I haven't had anything major come up with mirrors.
Okay.
But I
Because
would
I know
treat it
some
like a
people
piece of furniture.
consider them portals,
Yeah.
or that they can be portals.
I haven't had anything come up. I have had a portal. That bed had a portal attached to it, the one that everybody was having problems with.
No.
Yeah, that was very interesting. It had a spirit attached to it and a portal. It was really bad. And uh,
Talk
yeah,
about traveling in your sleep time, dream time.
well, these portals are not good. They're doorways and things can come through, and it's like leaving your front door open with a sign that says "Come on in." So it's as bad as a Ouija board at times. And that was a crazy one. And then as I talked to her about it, she said everybody that slept in that bed hates it. And I was like, yeah, um, there's a reason that bed's got stuff on it. And she was going to burn it. And I was like, I can clean the bed. And I said, I don't care what you do with it afterwards, but it was something I could deal with. So I always ask, am I able to deal with that? Yes. Okay, then let's do it. Um,
So
but
how do
like
you
that
go
one,
about cleaning a bed like that has portals?
that had a lot of layers to it. So it had emotional stuff, it had a spirit attached to it, and it had a portal. So that gets into some much deeper stuff that is not for the everyday person to be playing with.
So you have your checklist and your layers, and you just, I guess,
Yeah.
clear
When you're dealing
layer
with
by
portals
layer.
and stuff, you got to know what you're doing. And you can't just close something if something has come through. You have to make sure everything that came through goes back. And there's simple things and then there's really complicated stuff. And then when you get into darker stuff, that gets into a whole nother level of things. And this one had darker stuff attached to it. So that's a whole nother ball game that, I didn't even study, but I find myself the houses I'm getting are getting heavier and heavier. And I was talking with Source one day and I was like, is this where I'm going? And they're like, yeah, that's one of the directions. We're kind of pushing you in where the houses have heavier things in it. And houses that I thought were bad, I went back and asked, like, was that dark? And they're like, no, but it's coming. So, but they're
Hold
like,
on.
we will watch out for you, but we're going to allow some things to come through so you can learn from it. Like I did one apartment and the woman saw an apparition of the waist down of a guy in 1940s trousers. And it was interesting when I went home, I was typing the report and my keyboard froze up. And I got really mad. I hit the button on my keyboard like 3 times and I didn't know what I hit. And then my keyboard caught up to what I was typing and it said KKK. So then I grabbed my sticks and I said, "Is he in the KKK?" And it's like, yes. So spirit has a way of communicating with me through signs and symptoms, symbols, and things that I run across. And it was just interesting. I would have never picked up on KKK, and it came in that way. One time I was going through the dining room, and I smelled old rose grandmother perfume. Now I don't own anything that smells like roses. There's no potpourri, nothing in here. And I was like, there was just this concentrated mass. And I was like, what is that? And I knew that I've learned to be very open and not to throw something off when a sign comes in like that. So, of course, I'm like, get my sticks. And then I'm like, is this somebody? And it's like, yeah. So, in that apartment, there was an old grandmother and 2 boys, and they died of tuberculosis, and the grandmother hung around to take care of them. And there was some dark stuff from that KKK guy that was in the apartment. It's a 1920s apartment.
I was to say, it must be a really old building.
Yeah. Uh, so I was like, is this a person? And it was like, yeah. And I said, is your name Rose? And it was like, yes. And I said, are you the grandmother in that apartment? It was like, yes. And this is the first time a spirit actually reached out to warn me that there were things in there that knew that I knew about them. And she basically was like, you're my ticket out of here with the boys. And I don't need you to get beat up, but I'm letting you know that the thing in there now knows that you know and is going to be working against you. And that was the first time a spirit actually reached out to warn me about a house or an apartment I was working on because there was stuff in there that was pretty heavy. That KKK stuff was heavy, darker material. And that's the first time I didn't know a spirit could actually do that, but actually showed up twice to warn me because she wants to go back home and I'm her the help to get her back home. And she did not want them messing with me where I could not get her and the boys back home, which I thought was uh, very cool. I was like, I've never had that experience before, but just a very pungent rose smell, just instantly. And then I walked to the dining room and to go away. It was just in one spot. It happened twice. So that was really cool. And I got her and the boys back home. So that was really nice.
And the resident who lived there, the client who called you, how did they what did they perceive afterwards?
I mean, she was already picking up on stuff. Her daughter, it was a lady and her daughter, and the child was picking up on stuff. Children are very sensitive, like pets are very sensitive. So she was picking up on stuff. And she's like, the daughter knew where the bad spot was. She knew where the portal was. I was like, yeah. Um, I said, it's exactly where you pointed it out. So she was picking up on stuff. She did not like sleeping in her bedroom, and that's where the grandmother and the 2 boys were. And I was like, yeah. So she was hitting stuff, and then afterwards, it was like night and day. Now going up to the healing, the night before the healing, things got cranked up, which that can happen because they know we'd already set a date on when we were going to clear out everything. So the thing is, anything has access to text messages, emails. They can hear stuff, good and bad, or I won't say bad. Dark and light things can hear and see things that are happening. So it knew I was coming on a particular day. And the night before, she said it was just crazy stuff happening. And I said, it's just acting out. I said, we're going to deal with it. Don't worry about it. So after it cleared out, everything was done. no problems
Crazy
came up.
stuff like noise and
Yeah,
freaky
she spent the
feelings.
night with her boyfriend that night, and she said a shelf collapsed on the wall and things fell. And I said, yeah, it's just trying to rile you up. It knows it's going to be leaving. It knows I'm coming to work on this. And I said, it's just a last minute, trying to mess with you, and everything's gonna be fine. And it was, it cleared out, and they could tell a huge difference afterwards.
Oh, that's great, especially
Now
with
they
kids
had
involved.
something actually loud in the space. Now, if you don't have something loud in the space and you just want a fresh start, that's a different story. But this place actually had stuff, which is different from a house that calls and they're like, hey, I just went through a divorce. I just want a fresh start. I've gone through a lot of changes. That's a different. So every healing is different depending on what the person needs. Sometimes what they need supersedes what they actually want. So it just depends on what needs to be worked on. And with this, there was something in there, and the daughter commented on it, and the mother was picking up on stuff, and it was not nice. So it needed to move out.
So, so I have a question for, if there's a couple questions. So how does so say someone is stagnant in their career or, in a certain area of their life, and maybe they've lived in a couple places, right? I mean, obviously it's the person, but I would imagine the house. How do you work with something like that? And can you create a change for that person?
Well, I like to say every owner of a house leaves an energetic trace of their time in the house. So I look for the traces that are left by previous owners. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is going to be looking at the individual. Like, is there something coming in from a past life? Is there karma issues? Is there stuff inherited coming down through this person? Do they have detrimental attachments? Do they have psychic cords? Do they have certain things that are messing with them? So that's where I deal with the individual, looking at what their issues are to clean that stuff up to make them feel better. Are there chakras out of balance? Are there meridians out of balance? Do they organs that need healing? Certain things that I'm looking for.
So you've got a very comprehensive process. It
Yeah.
sounds like the
Yeah. People want
some
this magic bullet. And I was like, there's not one. It's a combination. It depends on the severity of the item. They want this magic thing that they can do that's going to knock out everything. And I said, unfortunately, I've never discovered that. So it just depends on the situation, and it's numerous protocols that are called in.
So is there kind of a time frame that it typically you allow when you're working on a project?
Depending on how messy the space is, it can take a couple weeks. Just
Mhm.
depends on what I find, what is needed, what the issues are. Um,
Your
and then,
research.
yeah, research, digging, and stuff. Um, so it just depends on the space and how much I have to dig up um, on it. So a couple of weeks.
And someone was asking, how long have you been doing the house healing?
I started in the end of 2020, now beginning of 2021. Then I got my LLC. So I was doing it part time, and then it got where I could not juggle it with my full time job. And there was a lot of changes at work, and I wasn't really happy with some of the changes. And I think Source was kind of trying to push me out, and it kept getting louder and louder. And it was like, get out of the nest, get out of the nest. And then around Thanksgiving last year, I left because I had clients on a list waiting, and I couldn't get to them because my old method, it took about a month per house, and nobody wants to wait. Everybody wants service immediately, and I had a bunch of people waiting. So that was putting pressure on me. And then finally, I just, in faith, walked out doing it full time. So I'm just now getting into about 6 months full time. I've done about 30 houses. Just finished my 30th. So every house teaches me something, stretches me, gives me new tools that I didn't have before. So it's always helpful to experience a house and to see the change in the client from the beginning to the end. So it's a very much about the journey, not the destination. Um, I had one house that the lady called, and it's a girl that went to high school with me, and she took one of my presentations, and she called me, and I went to the house, and the house looks beautiful on the outside, brand new house. Um, but it used to be on farm land. And I was like, what is going on? And she's like, I can show you or you can find it. I said, I don't care. So we went into the bathroom and there was something there. And they were the first owner. So I knew it wasn't a previous owner. And it was somebody that had died on the property. And he kind of followed her in and just set up residence in the bathroom. And her cat would just stare at the bathroom. Now, her bed, her back faced the master bath. Of course, husband felt nothing. So I was like, interesting. And I said, see, well, when this happened, I said, so you have a stalker in your bathroom. And she just looked at me and it took her back to a memory when she was 8. Her parents had got a divorce and they moved, her and her mother moved, and a stalker was a peeping Tom was arrested peeping in the window and she was 8. And she was like, oh my God. And I said, okay, so you have a stalker. I said, and he has triggered this memory for you to work on. I'm going to deal with him, but we're going to deal with you at age 8 and get to the root of it. He's just a tool to bring this up for you to work on. So I said, tell me how you sleep tonight. And she said it was horrible. She's like, I could feel something just like touching my hair. I was like, okay, in a case where something is so disruptive that the person cannot live in the space, typically I do the healing at the very end. But if it's really cranked up and they cannot make it that long, I will go ahead and pull out whatever's there. So I went ahead and pulled it out. And I said, how'd you sleep the next night? She said, totally different. And she said, the cat's acting fine. I said, no, we're still going to work on 8-year-old you. So we got to the root of that, did a healing on that. She would go around and close the blinds at night as soon as the sun was going down, almost like this fear of people looking in. When I did the healing, she said, I quit closing the blinds at night. So that was really cool. Her mother came over and was house sitting, and she said, your house feels different. So the mother was picking up on it. So that was very interesting, where a spirit did that. I had the house in Austria, they were doing demolition. And when you demo a house and start tearing things, if there's something there, it's not going to like it. They're just like human counterparts, they don't like change. So they were tearing down walls and stuff, and she was taking vacation time. And she said, every time I go to the house, I get a migraine. As soon as I go home, migraine stops. I said, there's something there. So I tune in, and it was this lady that lived in the house, and she hated it. Her husband drug her to this house. She hated the neighborhood. She hated the house. She resented living there. She ended up dying. She's kind of stuck because she has attachments. And she's still angry and mad. And she doesn't like the new owners coming in. I said, let me go ahead and pull her out and see what happens. So I pull her out, and she went over and she said, migraine stopped immediately. I was like, good. It was her. She did not like them, and they were tearing up a lot of stuff in that space. So, in some extreme cases, things have to be pulled out where it cannot wait till the end. In less extreme cases, I wait to the very end to do spirit rescue or clearing out of anything. I do all of it at one time. So it's a different process. But if it's so bad that the person can't live and they're like she feels something touching her, I'm like, okay, we're not going to tolerate that. It's like that needs to go. And the migraine lady, like she was wasting her vacation time trying to renovate a space, and the thing in there did not want her tearing up anything. So in that case, it was like it needs to be removed early. So I do that at the very beginning. If it's something loud like that, that doesn't happen all the time. I know we're talking about a lot of extreme cases. That is not the normal cases. Most people are calling if they're picking up on other things or they're having issues. So it works both ways.
Well, yeah, and you're talking to Dowsers, so we want
Yeah.
the weird and unusual.
Yeah.
Someone had a question in the chat about what about cancer? You know, what if someone in the house has cancer or someone who lived there previously had cancer?
I
Um,
had one house that the lady was on hospice. And boy, the energy in that room was heavy, a lot of anger, frustration, hopelessness, a lot of emotions. The daughter was picking up on it. It was a previous family that moved into this house. And then this family moved in. And the woman called and she goes, I don't call about stuff like this. And she goes, I still can't believe I'm calling you over this. I'm not a person that even looks or believes in stuff like this. And I said, what you're describing sounds like there's something there. So she got me in. I started looking at it and I was like, oh, yeah. And then I dowsed, what room did the mother die in? It was like that room. And I was like, okay. So a lot of heaviness. It definitely leaves an imprint. A lot of suffering because this was hospice maybe 10 years ago. So the technology was not as good as it is now. Now they have drugs and things that can really subdue a person. Back then, it was not as good as it is now. So a lot of suffering, pain. I think she had cancer on top of that. So it definitely leaves a fingerprint in a room. And then the daughter, that was her room. So she starts picking up on crying at night, just feeling stuff. There was some things in that room. That room had some portals too. So lots of stuff happening. So yeah, um, when someone suffers, it's going to leave a print. When someone dies in a space, that leaves a print. Is there's emotional outpouring, that's going to leave a spot. Fighting will leave a spot, but the more severe it is, the more of a imprint will be in that spot. And that's the thing, you don't know if somebody had an emotional breakdown in your space before you got it. You just don't know. And then there will be a room that you don't like, but you just think, oh, I'm having a bad day, because you don't see anything. So people blow it off thinking it's them. And when I go in, I'm like, no, there's stuff in that room. Um, so it kind of explains things.
oh yeah, and I would imagine if there was any kind of a threat or violence or some kind of a I would imagine that would be
Yeah.
have an imprint.
Like I knew a friend at a church and somebody had broken into the church. And she said, there's a room that nobody likes. And I wanted to clear it out so bad that she was like, I cannot let you into a church to do that. And I said, I could clear that. And she's like, no, I'm good. But nobody liked that space. They didn't like the room. And I said, is that the room that it happened in? She said, yeah. She said, that was going to be my office and I didn't like it. And I moved to the front. I was like, it's still there. So that leaves an imprint. Um, but because it was a church and this was very out there, it would not have gone over well for the congregation. And I don't even think I could do it in secret and nobody find out about it because if she got caught, then that would make her look kind of weird. And I don't know. But I wanted to get in there, but she was like, no.
So what if somebody had like a ranch, that was multiple acres and there was a main house and a guest house? Like how do you do like whole properties? How does that work?
I typically do the whole property, house, apartment, garage apartment, livable space. Everything is one space. So I count all of that when I'm working on a space because it's all one property. So I'll look at all the pieces. I've done garage apartments and houses that were separate but very close to each other. I just did a house that had an apartment that had an ex-military person that was in there that was going through severe PTSD. lots of emotions, hoarding, lots of mental stress. And he opened up stuff left and right. And he hung out in this apartment. In the apartment, when you walk up, you can just feel this heavy feeling. They had to rescue him out of the house.
Wow.
So lots of heavy, heavy stuff going on.
Well, and kind of on that same note, I mean, what if someone takes their life in a space?
Yeah.
What do you do about that? I'm sure that leaves a imprint.
I had a friend once that wanted me to tune into a house, and she told me where the house was, so I tuned in, and I'm like, yeah, it's bad. This woman, she was hung or died in the basement, and she's like, "Can you get her out?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm not allowed to just go to anybody's house and, start pulling people out. It's all about with dowsing permission. Um, I cannot adjust somebody's house without them knowing it. I don't do it in secret. I have to have the permission of whoever lives there. There's an authority upstairs, source honors free will. I cannot force people into something they don't want. I cannot make them do something. And, I would have to have the homeowner's permission to go in because I'm actually adjusting something in their space. I can't do that. Now, if they're outside the house, that's different. They still have to make the decision to cross over. But when they're in a house like that, I cannot like go in and start adjusting things, or do a healing under the table and hide it
Hmm.
and start adjusting things. I have to ask permission on stuff, and they're not going to let me just go in and start adjusting stuff in people's spaces that is not my space and that I don't have the authority to step in to.
Someone
So
was asking about narcissist or bipolar folks.
I did one house that had a schizophrenic that had died. Um, he didn't know he was dead. Very confused. When I connected to him, he appeared as a 14-year-old child, very childlike. That was interesting. Very heavy, very um, dark, dark stuff in the house. That was another heavy, heavy one. Um, they wanted to tear the house down, and I, the first lady called, and she's like, she owns both properties, and she got this house, and he died, and his mother lived there, and so she was afraid that he was in her house. I said, no, you have another set of people in your house. He's still in that house with his mom. I said, no. I said, let's clean your house first, and then we'll deal with that. So I got that house, and then they called me to hit the other house, and the property taxes had come back and skyrocketed. So she was going to have it tore down, and I asked Source, I was like, okay, so what's the rule if this crap is in a house and you tear the roof off? They're like, it looses to the neighborhood. I went, oh God, this is the house that had the schizophrenic. And they had called the cops repeatedly on him while he was alive. So I was like, okay. So I told her, I was like, let me pull him out and the stuff in there, get it out, and then you can do whatever you want. If you want to blow it up, bulldozer it, whatever. I don't care. So I got him out, and it was very interesting. Um he had a spirit attached to him that had messed with him when he was alive. And because he did not know he was dead, she was still screwing with him in death. And he didn't even know it. And she was really taking advantage of him. It's not possession. It's similar. It's a spirit. If you're going through a lot of crap, your auric field starts weakening, and things that it pushes away when you're healthy. When you're going through crap, it weakens and it creates areas. And there are, not to freak out anybody, but there are spirits walking around that if they were a jerk when they were living, they're a jerk when they're dead. And maybe they don't have the best intentions and they look for opportunities. And some of them can attach to somebody. It's not possession, but they kind of attach and their emotions go through the person. And I've had it happen twice, but this was actually a dead person that it was attached to. And it was dark. There was some dark stuff in that house. And I pulled that spirit off first. And when I got to him, I said, "It's time to go home." And the first thing out of his mouth was, "She doesn't want me leaving." And I said, "She's gone." It was the spirit attached to him. I had to get her off to free him up so I could talk to him. And that's the first thing I mean, I almost cried when he said it. I was like, oh my God. And he's like, "She doesn't want me leaving." And I said, "She's gone. She's not an issue anymore. It's time to go." So that was really cool. But yeah, he didn't know, a lot of confusion, a lot of, not every mental health issue is a spirit attached to somebody, but that was a serious one. I did have one teenager. This was the first one I ever had this happen to. So it was a friend of mine. She went through a crappy divorce. She had a breakup, and I'm going through my list, and a spirit's attached to the daughter. And I was like, really? This was the first one I ever had. And I was freaking out. And I was like, okay, let me check it again and check it again and check it again. And it was yes. So I gathered that he had died in a car wreck and she reminded him of his girlfriend and he did not have good intentions. And I was like, okay. So I was like, I gotta tell the mother this, and she's underage. And I'm like, oh God. So I said, well, do you want me to tell her or do you want to tell her? She goes, I'll tell her. So I told her the gist. I said, don't freak out, but there is a male attached to her. Now, she was going through a lot, week in Oric Field, divorce, father issues. Um, this was during the pandemic. There was so much crap going on and fighting at home. And this thing saw an opportunity and just attached. So she, of course, is a teenager and laughed at it. So until she went to bed that night and she felt something lean over in a male voice that says, "I love you." And I said, "That's him." What was weird is she was taking driver's ed and she kept having dreams and fear of dying in a car wreck. And I said, "That's him, his emotions coming through. That's not you." And I said, "Don't worry." I said, "I'm going to pull him off where that's not an issue." And he did not have the best intentions. He was kind of creepy. But she was in a spot. He took advantage of it and attached. The one that was on the schizophrenic, same thing. There was a opportunity. She jumped on it. And it was amazing that she could do that when he was dead, which was even creepier. It's like he didn't even know. And she took advantage of that. She was really overstepping her bounds in that situation.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Someone was asking about EMF protection and 5G.
Yeah. I
How
look at
do you
technopathic
deal with
stress.
that?
Yeah. So I look at different areas. Technopathic is one of them. So all your electronics, anything on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, um, you know, we live in a sea of EMF. We don't really know the long-term effects. I love my gadgets. I love all my technology, but some people are very sensitive to the wiring in their house. High transmission power lines. I'm not going to try to get into a debate about 5G or anything, but it's just there's a lot of stuff out there and we just don't know. Some of the worst culprits are the microwave oven and the Wi-Fi router. Some people get headaches if it's too close to the bed, the Wi-Fi router. Even our appliances now have computers in them. Our cars have computers. Your power meter on the outside of the house, they're digital now. So if your bed's on the other side, that can cause issues if you're sensitive. So yes, your technopathic things, that can definitely cause issues depending on how sensitive you are. So
How
that's
do you
definitely.
recommend remedying the technopathic stress?
I just asked if there's something. detrimental in them. Most of the time there is. And then I ask for those items to be cleared. And I go through a list of items. So I start with each room looking at items. Then I do miscellaneous items, which would be things like cell phone, AirPods, iPads, Bluetooth speakers, loose things. And then there's things in the house like security systems, smart appliances, televisions that are in fixed locations. Those will actually map out on the floor plan. And then I count cars. If you have the electric cars, they have a lot more gadgets in them, like Prius and stuff like that, versus an older model car may not have as much stuff. So it just depends. And then I ask how bad it is to kind of see which ones are really, really strong. Normally, the Wi-Fi router and the microwave are the highest. Cell phone would be up there. The low end would be um, maybe security system, something smaller would be on the low end. But then I had one house that was out in the country, and I don't know if you know what high transmission power lines look like. They look like regular power lines, but they're bigger, they're beefier. You see them in the country, they'll clear out a path of land going up a hill where they're taking high voltage electricity to neighborhoods and sending it out to all the houses with the lower power lines. So those big honking ones, they have a lot of electricity running through them. So I did a house once, and she didn't even know this. And when I went on Google Earth, you could see the lines running on the side of the house up the mountain. And I said, "That's affecting your house." And she goes, "I didn't even know what that was." And I was like, "Those are high transmission power lines. So they are more amped up power lines. So they radiate more energy in them."
Yeah, and those I don't know what they call them, but there's like it's like a whole field of transformer looking things.
Yeah. Like a substation.
I
Um,
guess. And they've studied it's illegal to put a school around them because they have such a high
yeah.
incidence of cancers.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah,
just
we really don't know the long-term effects, and technology changes all the time. And, they're talking about holding your phone to your head so much. Is there a link to brain cancer with that? There's just a lot we just don't know that comes with our gadgets and stuff. They're fun to play with, but, is there another side that can be detrimental?
well, and I mean, I guess, like a lot of dowsers, we can do things. You know what I mean? We don't know what we don't know, so why not try it,
Yeah.
right? We're only limited by our imagination. So do you do, I guess, a pretty high level of um protection before you go
Yeah.
in? Would you like to share
Uh,
your process?
like I do what I call psychic protection, where I just kind of run through the chakras, waking them up, beefing up the auric field. There's many different versions, but it's just energy follows intention. So it's more about the intention of like putting barriers up. I tell people you don't go outside if it's raining without an umbrella. Don't leave your house without doing protection of some kind. Um, and of course, if I'm going to a house, I'm definitely going to make sure I've got protection and stuff, especially if there's something really crazy in the house. And then when I come home, cleaning things off of me, is there anything that has attached from the house that I was working on? Psychic cords, so cutting cords, letting go of stuff like that. And after a healing, I kind of draw a line where I'm energetically separating myself from the house, where I'm done with it, so it doesn't interfere with me anymore. So yeah, cutting cords is good at night. Is a good process to go through, and then psychic protection first thing in the morning. And then I add more layers to it because I'm getting into crazier houses, and that requires more work, and um, you know, I need more protection because of the stuff that I'm working on. So sources been sending me bodyguards to help kind of protect me as I'm going through stuff. That house that had the child with the Ouija board, it was funny. We were mapping the house out, and the rest of the house looks perfectly fine. And then you get the teenager room, it looks like crazy. Um, so like a normal teenager. So there's two bedrooms in the back, and he's in one. And when I got to the back one, I'm like, ooh, I'm not feeling good. And I almost cranked up my shields. I had not cranked my shields up too much, and I almost cranked them up and called in reinforcements. And I heard Source say, don't do that, because if you do, the thing in there now knows that you know. Just go in, measure, and get out. And I was like, okay. So that was the first time I was told not to do protection, or not to crank it up to the level I was fixing to crank it up to, and call in like big time reinforcements, because sometimes it's better to fly under the radar and go in, get the information. Most of my healings and stuff I do at home remotely. I'm more protected at home than being actually in the house. Normally, I'm only in the house to measure and maybe to look at furniture and electronics. The one-on-one I can do on the phone. And if I've got the floor plan, I don't even have to go into the house. And if somebody lives remotely, I'll say, take your phone and just kind of walk through the house and do like a video, just kind of walking from one room to the next. So I can have visually pictures. Some people will take multiple pictures and shoot it to me like in a Dropbox where I have each room and I got photographs. And I'll be like, go around the outside. Let me see the whole thing. Especially if there's not Google Images or something I can look at, but especially for the inside. And like, where's the power meter, stuff like that. Do you have a satellite dish, stuff like that, that I can pick up on.
Do
Um,
you have a special prayer that you use for protection?
no, I mean, just pod's going off again. Uh, it's evolved throughout the years. I mean, now I think if they're sending bodyguards in, then they know I'm getting into some stuff that I need more protection. As I've done more houses, I've had more guides coming in. So they're bringing different pieces of the puzzle. So I started off with one guide, and then another one would pop in, and then they were coming in every week. So I've had lots of them coming in with house healing, and they kind of will bring a different component of something that I didn't train in or didn't know about, or and they'll be like, watch out for this, or I want you to do this before you do that, insert this in. So that kind of helps keep me kind of protected. And sometimes I'll see something online and somebody will be doing something and I'll be dowsing, go, should I be doing that? And it's like, yeah, add that to that protocol. And I was like, okay. Um, or I'll hear a teacher talk about something. I'm like, never thought about that. And it's like, should I add it? And they're like, no, don't worry about that. And sometimes I'll hear something really cool and I'm like, should I study that? And they're like, no. But then I'll run across something else and I'm like, can I study? And they're like, yes. So they kind of direct where uh, I'm going. They keep me on a very short leash at times.
That's all fascinating. Someone put a question in the chat. So how do you charge, Jason,
So
for
I've
your
got
house
three
healing?
different packages that I do now. I've got one where I just work on the person that starts at $200 on a person. Then I've got one where I just do the space that starts off at $400 for one level of a house up to 1,500 square feet. So I charge the bigger the house, the greater the square footage, the higher the price goes. So it's prorated based off the size. I tack on for extra floors, extra square footage above 1,500 square feet. And then I've got the combo package, which would be house and people. That starts at $600 and it goes up based off of livable basement, attics, livable attic, garage apartments, anything above 1,500 square feet. And then, of course, if you've got more people, like I'll do up to maybe two adults and maybe two children. If you've got like 10 people living in your house, then I'm going to add more for people because it takes time to look at each of those people and assess what's going on. And I actually have to do a one-on-one with each of them to see what's happening. And most married couple, they'll speak as one, or sometimes the wife will be the spokesperson for the whole family if the kids are really young. And we'll talk about stuff. But sometimes I've had things come up where one spouse is like, I do not, or maybe it's two people dating each other and they got a condo and they're like, I do not want to share this with the person I'm living with. I'm like, okay. So I made it private. So I did a one-on-one with one and a one-on-one with the other. And then I marked what was completely private that would not get shared, and did it that way.
And what about like if there's, so that was the house and the people. When you say house, are you including the property, the land?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So one's just people, one's just house, and one is house, people, and land. It's everything. The
So
combo
kind
would
of
be,
2, 4, and $600, and then it can be extra depending on your particular circumstance.
yeah. And like if
So,
I map it out, it takes longer to do like second floors, third floors, bigger houses. I had did one house that had an outbuilding plus a garage apartment. So there's three structures. So you have to map all that out and look at how they all connect to each other. So if you live locally, I'll come out and map it. I have an app that I use that does floor plans. If you live farther away, you're going to have to get me a floor plan. It doesn't have to be architectural grade, but the more accurate your floor plan is, when I draw on top of it, it will be more accurate. If it's not to scale, then my drawings will be a good representation, but it won't be exactly where the item is. So as long as you don't draw it in crayon, it should be fine. I tell people that your healing is not based off how pretty the floor plan looks, but it does. I'm very anal about floor plans looking really good and like knowing where your bed is and where everybody's sleeping, where you spend a lot of time. That's the stuff that I really look at. Your bed, your desk, your favorite chair, especially if there's something in that area.
interesting. And a lot of people thrift now. So not only decorative items and furniture, but clothing. So I guess it's always really good to do a good thorough cleaning of.
Yeah, sometimes I'll get stuff in a closet and I'm not gonna go through their underwear drawer and stuff. I'll put a note like three things in drawer. I don't have to know what the items are. I can clear a space pretty quickly. But I like to be very detailed. Like I'll say this picture, this chair, this pillow, this bed's got stuff, and I'll list it like in the report after I douse through if there's something. But yeah, when you're picking up stuff, I like antiques. Antiques have a lot of history behind them. Maybe you go to an estate sale that was a crime scene 2 weeks before. You really don't know what was happening. So I encourage people, when be careful what you bring into your space. Like when I always take my rods, I will douse everything. Especially if you're going to bring something in. Like, should I get this? Is this okay to have? Is there some issue with this item? And having sticks may not be the easiest way. Some people do a pendulum. You can do deviceless dowsing. That's another thing you can do, just to see before bringing it home. Um, but anybody that brings home something and stuff starts changing in the environment, it is in the furniture. I've seen it too many times where they're like, yeah, I moved into this house and the previous owner left some furniture and all hell broke loose. And it's like, yeah, it's coming from the furniture. And then they got rid of the furniture and things cleared out almost instantly. And I was like, yeah, it was furniture. So furniture can definitely have some stuff, especially
What's,
beds. Beds can hold a lot.
oh yeah, so I'm thinking the
This was an apartment in New York, and the lady's like, "Yeah, weird stuff is happening." And she's like, "The previous owner left stuff," and I went, "Oh God." And I said, "Yeah, I know what it is." And then the next message was, "Oh, I got rid of everything, and it feels better." I was like, "Man, I wanted to work on a house in New York so bad," and I was like, "Well, um, so maybe in the future." But yeah, that one was attached to. It wasn't everything, but it was a good chunk of it was coming from the furniture. Um, but I
there
didn't
is a,
have her as a client. She had just reached out and said, "Hey, I saw your website. This is kind of interesting. I was kind of curious, and I was dreaming of going to New York, working on the house. I was like, woo. And I said, the apartments are like this big. So it'd take like 5 seconds to douse it. So they're tiny apartments. but it was an old building. I was like, yeah, there's going to be some stuff. And then she said the furniture. And I was like, oh, yeah, there's going to be some stuff. And then she got rid of the furniture. And I was like,
Well,
well,
really hard to move furniture in New York in a lot of places. So
yeah,
yeah, I imagine they leave it. Somebody had a question about light checking. Let me see what this
light
says.
checking,
Any tips on how to do light checking or clearing, basics to ask? So I'm not sure
light.
if that's literally lights or if that is if somebody was doing some, you know, general checking about a space.
I mean, if it's a space, you could just ask, is there anything detrimental in this space? Is there something missing that's not good in this space? If you're talking about real light bulbs and you're talking about, is it technopathic? You know, you could douse. A lot of light bulbs now are Wi-Fi light bulbs. You could douse and go, is there anything technopathic in that light bulb? Can it be cleared? Um, so that would be the technique for that.
Okay, so technopathic is anything having to do with technology. Is that
Yeah,
correct? Okay.
yeah. So that's just
Okay.
a collective term for stress that's coming from electronics. So any electronic you could douse and go, is this technopathic? Light bulbs, of course, the big stuff, routers and stuff. But then there's things like some of the newer light bulbs have stuff in them. So checking that, um, small things, Bluetooth speaker, a phone charger. You could say, is there anything technopathic? You
The Ring
know,
doorbell, yeah.
yep. Ring
Alexa,
doorbells. I
yeah.
started adding that to my list. Ring doorbells, security cameras, anything on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, um, is going to have technopathic. But I
Yeah.
don't want to scare you. I mean, I always ask, how bad is it? You know, if I say it's bad, well, how bad? So I use a scale 1 to 10. So that lets me know um, it's all bad. It's just cumulative and it builds up over time. So it could be a 3, but then your power meter is like a 9. So it's
Right.
bad, but on the scale of things, it's on the low end. So
Right.
everything's
And you can
default.
neutralize things
Yeah.
and clear the energy. Yeah,
I've
there's
never had
different
a
things.
spirit attached to electronic before. Wouldn't mean I would never have that in the future, but I've never experienced that. I've had it with furniture, but I haven't had it with electronics.
Yeah. Boy, so many good things to think about now. I feel like I've got a big list of questions I need to sort of just ask.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. It really opens your eyes to what is in my space. Just
Well,
because
and
you can
how am I
feel
being affected? And have I carried something from house to house to house?
that can happen too. Yeah.
You know,
I had one lady that had some crazy stuff and she moved to a new house and it's still doing it. And she said, do you think I brought it? And I was like, yes. She hasn't signed on as a client yet, but she's like, yeah, it could, it can definitely, and I can douse it and say, yeah, that can happen. Um, it can carry.
Joanne in Canada is saying that she's had spirits connected to
Uh,
technology and that she does kind of some similar work in Canada.
mm, yeah, it's
So
never come up, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't. I get stretched every day. I find something. Sometimes I freak out when they're like, we're going to show you something you've never dealt with before. I was like, oh, great. It's like
yeah.
something new.
So
Yay.
now once you do a house healing, do you find that people no longer have problems? I mean, is it does it resolve the problem? Does it stay clean?
Well, nothing stays perfect forever. You're an energetic being. Your people are constantly going to be leaving the space, bringing stuff in with them. I try to make people more consciously aware of bringing things home with them, thinking a little bit more like fighting with neighbors can actually do stuff. You know, being more conscious about spiritual hygiene with energy and stuff. So the big stuff in the house will stay okay, but you're an energetic being. Your energy changes all the time and you can have a bad day. I try to tell people if you have a bad day, just don't stay in a bad spot for prolonged periods. When you do, that triggers other things to come in you know, um, You
Or you
know,
could
one
be
bad
having a
day.
bad day because something glommed on and
Yeah.
hasn't, yeah,
And just
left.
being aware, like when you're purchasing stuff, should I get that? Should I bring that home? Is there something on it? You know, does it need to be cleaned before I bring it home? I'm pretty good about clearing stuff as I'm in the parking lot. Going home, I can do it while I'm driving, and clear out stuff. I
Boy, I'm
have
just
had,
thinking
hmm?
about going to the grocery store,
Yeah,
and
I mean, you can
how
do,
many hands have touched that,
yep, or
food
buying a
to make it.
couch on a showroom floor. How many people have sat in that on that couch? Maybe the people moved it, dropped it, and didn't like trying to get it up to a second, third floor apartment, and they were pissed when they were moving it, or it dropped on their feet when they were moving it. You can douse food items. Is this something that's good for me? It may have all the right words on the package. Is this something good for me? And it looks weird in the grocery store doing it, but you could do the stuff you've already purchased. Like, I know it says it's healthy, but does my body do good with this? And you'll get a yes or a no. And it's like, no. And it's like, you could douse stuff in the grocery store. Like, out of these items, what's the best one for me, for my
Right.
particular body?
Or a lot of times people have groceries delivered. What's
Yeah.
the energy of the delivery person or the person
Yeah.
who selected those things? Yeah. That you're
You can
bringing into
also
your home.
you can also douse supplements and anything that you
Right.
take. Like, is this the best version of this that I should be taking? You know. And I don't want to freak people out where they're like, oh my God, everybody touches it and they turn into germaphobe, spiritual hygiene people.
Well, no,
But
we're dowsers. We can clear it.
yes, but you just have to think about stuff differently. And it's like, oh, wow. And it's like, that can happen.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll see something on television and I'm like, ooh, can that happen? And I'll run to my office and I'm like, got a yes. And I was like, that really can happen. And it's like, yeah. Or I'll watch a show that's just really out there and they're talking about just crazy stuff. And then I'll get back to my office. I'm like, no, was that real? And they're like, yeah. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
So
And you can pick stuff up from watching videos or TV. You know what I mean?
I've heard
Yeah.
case studies where teenagers were playing video games and opened up some stuff, and the parents could tell a huge difference in their children, and it was linked to the Xbox and some video games. I haven't had that as a client, but I've read a case study that happened with.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Now, do you teach a class, Jason?
Not yet. I mean, I'm just starting to get my business going. Maybe in the future, maybe teaching classes in the future. Right now, I just kind of do outreach and programs. I've got one program, what I do as a house healer, which is kind of what I'm doing now. And then I've got one on other topics. I'm trying to expand and throw a wide net to capture many, many people. And I'm not trying to get all the woo woo people. I'm trying to get everyday people. A lot of people want to put me in the paranormal group. That's not my area. I am not a Ghostbuster. I do 64 other things that are just as bad as spirits, but people think that's the big thing. And I'm like, no, there's other things that are just as bad. So I
When you
don't,
say bad, you mean detrimental.
or yeah, detrimental.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't want to be in that category, and some of those people will show up to my classes and our presentations, and I'm like, I tried to say it in the nicest way possible. I'm like, I don't really agree with what I see with paranormal investigators on television, but the whole time I'm like, um, because I just don't like them going to a space trying to evoke a response out of something, being disrespectful, being loud, yelling at the thing. I'm like, that's not the best approach for doing that, in my opinion. So I try to separate myself because that's not my client. My clients are everyday people that are having issues. Now, if something weird's going on, I try to reach them where they're at. And I don't try to freak them out completely, but it depends on what I find. And I try to find a way to explain it in the most simplest terms possible. I'm not trying to rock their world, rock their boat or anything, but most people I get, they know about energy, they've heard about energy. I've had yoga people, I've had housewives, I've had everyday people, lawyers. It just depends, nurses. So I think people are more open to energy now. You see it in the collective
Absolutely.
more. Like before, if I would have mentioned parallel realities, people would have stoned me 10 years ago. But now they're like, oh, I saw that on a Marvel movie. And I'm like, okay, there you go. So they've heard portals and past lives and stuff. So now it's really easier to talk to people. But I always try to meet them where they're at. Like, what's your background? That lady that had the woman from hospice that died in the bedroom, she was not into this at all. So I had to walk very gingerly with her and go, it's just, she's just went through some stuff and she's stuck and we're going to get her back home. So I just try to make it very simple, I try to take the woo woo out of it. When I do my presentations, I tone it down. But then I got people in the audience that want that woo woo cranked up. And I'm like, tone it down because, the lady in the front's about to pass out because I'm talking about dead people. So I try to meet them where they're at and keep it low key. I try to be naturally supernatural. I don't try to freak out anybody because I don't want people scared to call me because they don't think that I can work with them or I'm too out there. So
So
I'm
will
really
you,
selective over, like, I've told you more than I even bring up in class because I would never talk about certain things because it would just, the audience, I never know. Most of my audiences are general audiences, so I just don't know what their background is.
yeah,
And
we've opened the door now. You're out of the
yeah,
closet.
with
So
dowsers, it's different. I can go a little deeper, but with the general public, I just kind of keep it low key and
we're getting
try to,
some comments. Yeah, we get it. Okay,
yeah.
Jason, so tell people how they can find you. How can they contact?
So my company is Elysium House Healing. It's Elysium, househealing.com. If you go to the website, it's got different sections and descriptions and symptoms of things and what I look for and what the process is, the different packages. I'm also on social media. Elysium House Healing is on Facebook. It's on Instagram. If you're not into social media, it's also on LinkedIn. I've been networking a lot on LinkedIn recently. So check out those places. Definitely check out the website. So it's a good source of information. I try to pick the least crazy stuff to put on the website. I'm thinking about a podcast in the future, and the podcast will be the crazy stuff. I'm just not there yet, but it's source has been pushing me like,
You've got a few stories to tell. So
yeah. So I've got to protect the names of the clients, and I'm trying to get enough stories that I can build, and it's starting to build. So I've got stuff I can share. And some of the clients don't mind being interviewed. Some are very private, like they would not want to be interviewed. So I've got to find ways of changing stories up and
the
tweaking
names will
things.
be changed to protect the innocent.
I try not to say their names in class. I was like, thank goodness none of my clients typically show up. So I'm like, oh, please don't call out her name during this. So I'll just sit there and go, yeah, that place. Yeah. So,
So, well, thanks. This has been so informative and so interesting. And
yeah,
yeah, I think there's a lot of curiosity about your house healing, and you're getting a lot of love and appreciation in the chat. So
yeah,
we thank you so much.
very good.
Yeah. So yeah, reach out if you're curious about a house healing with Jason. He's given you his website, and it'll his contact stuff is also it'll be on the replay, and our
Yeah.
replay will be going out next week.
Okay.
And yeah, getting fascinating. Yeah, lots of stuff like that. So thank you, and thank everybody that has donated. It makes it all possible, and we appreciate uh, your jumping. We went one more time. Will you tell us the website?
Elysium House Healing, Elysium househealing.com.
Okay, great.
So Elysium
Well,
means paradise. So when I'm done cleaning your house, I want it to be your Elysium. But everybody's Elysium is different and every healing is different.
And Elysium, you want to define what that is for people?
Yeah, just said it's paradise. So it's a state of bliss, paradise. So that's what I want your space to be afterwards.
Excellent. Well, thank you
I
so
actually stole
much.
the name from Thomas Jefferson. There's a quote that he talks about Elysium, and I said, "That's the prettiest word I've ever heard." And I kind of put it in my pocket, and my guides were like, "That's going to be the name of your company." And luckily, nobody had they were using Elysium and healing, but not house healing. So I was able to snag it and then attach the LLC to it, and then get it registered. So that worked out good.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. See you.